Well, let's move on to Surah 33. Uh, the thing that this surah starts with is that a prophet should not obey to any uh, non-Muslim or any Muslim who is not in the same denomination the prophet considers himself to be in. Now this is a good advice. I give you a good advice to this prophet, to any prophet. If you come across even with a policeman who is even an unbeliever or something, uh, or someone like a policeman, with that kind of authority, it is a very advisable thing to obey them, whether they are in your denomination or not, because you can end up really fast in jail, um, especially if you meet with Chuck Norris, because Chuck Norris is that good. So if you don't want to end up with your heart in your fist, then don't oppose Chuck Norris. Now, there is this thing that no human was born with two hearts. Well, I know this is an allegorical picture, but in case someone wants to handle this as literal thing, then well, I have a pretty strong feeling that even humans were born with more than one heart occasionally. You know, there are things like octopus that have naturally some three hearts and that kind of thing. Wow, so it is at least only on humans, but well, what I wish to mention here too, that there is, it is mentioned that Mr. A created things in pairs. As although this is not a points toward sexual in reproduction, it is pretty obvious that they meant that. Well, an awful lot of things don't even know what is sex or reproduction, like prions or viruses, most of the bacteria, and even the sexual reproduction of bacteria, a very other thing than the sexual reproduction of multicellular organisms. There are plants with asexual reproduction, even insects. So, wow, that's science in the Quran. Now, also there is this thing that if you are raised by another father than your blood father, uh, what is also a complicated thing to determine. Many times it requires modern genetic tests to decide who is the father of someone. That the non-blood father cannot be called father for real. But later it mentions that if Mr. A would like a son, like Jesus, then he wouldn't want to choose a female, like Mary, to fuck with. So I first thought that what Mr. A is described as a gay persona, but later in another surah, so it raises the complications that it is mentioned only in another surah that he can point on certain, he could point on someone or something that and say that that is my son, but as he wouldn't turn to be the father of that thing, that it wouldn't really be, couldn't really be called as his son. uh, you see the problem here. uh, Now the Quran here gives a hierarchy. First you should show respect to prophets, then your blood relatives, then towards the other believers of Islamic faith. Of course the unbelievers, non-Muslims, shall be killed, because Mr. A is merciful. And this is even true when a prophet makes an obviously wrong military decision. Well, you just shut up and do your stuff. Do what is taught to you. Now here was the point where I thought it is time to mention that the only easy things to Mr. A are generally destroying things. I don't know why. Well, the Bible God was of course a war god, but so this has some base, but I don't know why this was necessary. There is this thing about divorce in Islam, that if your wife doesn't want to be anymore Muslim, then without anger you should divide from her. Now the Prophet's wives have a bad living because they can't even leave their own houses, and there is a pretty lot of restriction who they can talk with, how they can talk with them, and that kind of things. Now there is a very interesting concept, an immoral concept in this surah, where it is told that if the prophet says that this and that person should marry, then they should, and you have no voice in that matter. I wouldn't like that, most of the time at least. And there is that thing that Muhammad just to some side gives his son's wife to show that this is morally acceptable, and that kind of silly things. When Muhammad never had a male child. There is some other thing about marriage. Who can marry, when can marry, how they can marry. Oh well. There is this thing that Mr. A and his angels are praising the prophet, or something like that. What? This was just a little bit surprising for me. The regulars, some things that start to be mentioned as Mr. A regular way to deal with things, like the non-Muslims are, well, without mercy, are killed. because Allah is merciful, of course, or something like that. And there is this, well, you just read it yourself how non-Muslims will suffer in hell. they will, their face will be skinned, and that will be on some kind of stake. And actually, it is here. It is where it is described how humanity ended up with worshipping Allah. Allah, Mr. A first tried to offer this thing to the skies, then and the earth and the mountains, but they rejected that, and only the stupid humans accepted this task. And Allah is fine with that because now he can punish male and female humans. Because of course he's that kind and merciful.